Gee, I've played a lot of video games lately. I probably should get to that retro games are important video before the summer ends. Well, I certainly won't get to that now, would I? Hey guys, Luxker here, and alright, I'll admit, I have been slacking on making videos this summer as I just graduated college and now have a lot of free time to build up my portfolio. But there were a few games that really took up my free time. One of those games is the great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Initially revealed back in April, though it got leaked a few months beforehand, it was set to release at the end of July this year. I could not wait to play this duology, because the first two games that were originally on the 3DS never made it stateside. I heard so many good things from people who were able to play fan translations, or people who knew Japanese well, that I just could not wait to pick these up. And when I eventually played and beat them, I can say without a doubt that they are some of my favorite games in the series, though there is one glaring flaw with them. That's what I am here for today, to look at this duology from another angle and put it on its head.
Objection!
For about half a decade, I was very interested in the original Ace Attorney trilogy. After I watched Nintendo Capri Sun's Let's Play of the three games, I wanted to dabble into the games for myself and see what makes them so special to people. I quickly realized how much charm the characters had. Even though it plays like an anime courtroom drama, Phoenix Wright is just a stereotypical looking anime lawyer with a blue suit and flashy hair, and has a lot of charm and is very funny when you play as him. When I play the trilogy, I always make these goofy faces whenever Phoenix talks outside the courtroom because of how his sprites look. They are so expressive and easily show how this character reacts in these situations.
Hold it!
This is my first point on how investigations mean a lot to this series. That you are playing as the person in the courtroom pointing his finger at the prosecutors. Right there in the moment. You don't need to see his reactions, but because the writing in these sections are on point with the player's emotions, it makes me feel like I am in the same space as Phoenix is. Take for instance in case 3 of Trials and Tribulations when Jean Armstrong took Maya around to show her around the TRIBULATIONS restaurant. Only when you come back to the restaurant later to see Maya dressed up in a maid's outfit only to get a reaction out of Phoenix. It doesn't bear much importance to the overall investigation, but it's funny moments like these that show the charm out of the main characters. Although this example can be a little bit fan-servicey. Speaking of this case, I find it to be one of the great examples in Ace Attorney to have an interesting investigation segment without bearing too much in the overall story of the game. To start, you're mostly hanging out at a crime scene, Tribune, to look for clues using a point-and-click style of investigating. But other than that, you are investigating a fruit-filled park called Vitamin Square, a computer company that specializes in making CDs, which was where the victim worked and made the important alibi as to why, and a very shady money lending business. But it's at those places where money is basically the focal point in this case, where the MC Bomber CD that Glenn Elge uses can be sold for millions, and he wants to sell it to the killer of this case, Tiger. Only because Glenn is a huge gambler and wants to make his money back by selling an illegal CD to someone he doesn't know, only to be foiled by Tiger, because he needs that money to pay back Viola's medical bills, as he is responsible for injuring her and her grandfather, who is a big crime boss, and is forcing Tiger to pay back in compensation. All of this is revealed during the investigation section and not during the courtroom segments, which is perhaps where a defense attorney like Phoenix Wright would want to ask more questions about the CD, or about Viola's medical bills. So what does this have to do about the great Ace Attorney investigation segments? Well, it's just that those sections have nothing to go off of in relation to the setting. You are in London at the end of the 19th century. It's cool that there is more realism, but investigating around London seems boring and drab feeling. Especially since there is so many places in the game you can go back to in every case, such as Strongheart's office. We go here so often in the stories, only just to talk with Strongheart and just move on. Investigating the place reveals not much, and just flavor texts like, oh, there's a lot of books here, and they sure bring out how a clock works, and oh, a night statue! Jeez, man! This place feels so important because it houses the main antagonist in the game, and you just get to see the same flavor text over and over. I feel like the only interesting part of the two games that have interesting areas are Sholmes Suite and the Forensic Laboratory because, for one, both places have a lot to interact with and doesn't feel boring the slightest to explore, and two, they both are very important to Sholmes and Iris, because that's where Professor Mikotoba has worked all this time. Also, I want to point out that skeleton in the laboratory is cool, and Ryunosuke should be ashamed for fearing it. I also want to bring up the Waxwork Museum as well, because even though it has a very distinct visual with wax figure crime scenes being shown off, it still gives off that drab look that pretty much every area in the investigations give off, and the scene showing Kazuma's father coming out of the grave in the Waxwork Museum doesn't have a lot to be desired either.
Hold it!
And that's my second point on why investigations are important. That they need to have a distinct visual feeling to feel important to the overall case. Going back to Recipe for Turnabout, I mentioned Très Bien restaurant and how important the look of the crime scene is. A very French looking restaurant with white tablecloths and vases at every table. We know that Gene Armstrong does in fact run the restaurant, so he does make the place look the part. The restaurant though doesn't have the best food, which is an underlying part of how Tiger is involved because he lends money to help keep the place looking nice from the contract we learned about from the previous trial. Also, can we talk about how cool looking Vitamin Square is? It's literally just a playground with a slide built from stacks of fruit. It's one of the most creative looking places in Ace Attorney for sure. To compare this with London in The Greatest Attorney, sure there's a sense of realism here, but all we are going to is the same 3-story apartment outside the same road we were just on. This is especially true in The Greatest Attorney 1, where there is only 2 out of the 5 cases where you get to meaningfully investigate, but only in one part in Case 5 where you get to do multiple objectives at once. Luckily the second game improved on this, but not by much, as I feel we are still going through the same places as one huge area of a huge park, or the office of a prison with all this weaponry. Like, all this is cool and all, but I don't like looking at this. One section of Case 3 as you explore Enoch Drebber's lab, but we get any chance to see the thing out because when you check the door, you would instantly advance to the next area. As if they don't want me to explore all the cool gadgets strung around here and just check the arrows and trophy and move on.
Take that!
The third point in why investigations are important is that it needs to have a cool gimmick implemented into them that doesn't have to go around finding clues and evidence and just talking to people. That would really dull out the process. It makes the game feel more like a visual novel and not a detective crime scene battle game. Starting from Justice for All, you get introduced to Mayas Magatama, which has connections with looking into the soul of people who you're talking to. When someone doesn't want to reveal vital information after you talk to them, a lock icon will appear on a dialogue option. This is your chance to present the Magatama and have a chance to break through the victim's psych locks by presenting evidence or choices to break through the person's locks. This gimmick is a staple of Ace Attorney's investigation segments because it feels a lot like a cross-examination segment in trials, but is more involved and doesn't have a prosecutor or judge to look over them. I personally like these segments because it provides the trial and error feel of trials. Get it? Trials? Trial and error? But feels very personal to the person trying to break the psych locks. The Great Ace Attorney offers the Dance of Deduction as its investigation gimmick, which is very different than breaking psych locks as you are using the increased capabilities of the 3DS to look for clues on the person, crime scene, or just present evidence to change what Sholmes is originally deducing. It's more involving on the player, and I prefer this over the repetitive trial and error nature of psych locks, although it does get rid of the personal nature of psych locks, which was what I enjoyed more than this.
Objection!
Finally, the main reason why investigations are important for the future of the Ace Attorney series is how it pertains to the narrative of the entire game. Since you got to this point in the video, you probably play all the Ace Attorney trilogy and the Great Ace Attorney, so I don't have to spell out for you that story is the most important part of these games, but at the same time, you still must truck on through to see what happens next. That's the enjoyment part of it, and no case could be better than the final case in Trials and Tribulations. Bridge to the Turnabout! I won't talk about how amazing this case is in detail, but I want to talk about how the investigation segment really told a story with all of the previous points I mentioned. Right off the bat, you are in this very visually distinct area. two cliff sides with a bridge in between connecting it. One side is the crime scene, where the other is where another crime scene happened. The murder of Maya's mother, Misty Faye. But throughout this investigation segment, we keep finding clues as to where she was killed, one side of the bridge or the other side. It's not until we learn that this case reveals events that happened in the previous games. Mia's death, the DL6 incident, Morgan Faye's motive for Pearl becoming the new master of the crane channeling school, and the events that happened in the first case of the game with the game's main villain, Dahlia Hawthorne, who is probably one of my favorite antagonists in Ace Attorney. Just going through manipulative and vindictive tactics, all to get revenge on Phoenix for staying alive after she got put behind bars. As well as Maya for not only putting her mother behind bars, but letting Mia, her biggest enemy, roam freely by channeling her spirit into her. This area is also where Phoenix gets the most out of his character, such as when he fell through the burning Dusky Bridge, or being surprised that Edgeworth of all people is taking his place on account of his injuries. How about the surprising twists and turns, such as when he learned that Misty was under the guise of a famous author, learning that Iris is Dahlia's twin sister after Phoenix somehow meeting her before, and learning about Pearl throwing graving on a hanging scroll in the inner temple because she couldn't read what Gravely Rose meant. Speaking of Pearl, like almost every character playing a part in this case, developed the most out of her character, not just because of her inability to read and follow directions written by her mother Morgan Faye, but because she is put on the line of being the next Crane Village master instead of the trapped Maya, whom that was Morgan's final wish for her. All this heavy stuff talked about in the investigation segment. Let's not forget that you can freaking play as Edgeworth and investigate with him for part of the case as well. That automatically makes this one of the best cases in the series, right? But you are already thinking, what about the Ace Attorney investigation series? That duology really took advantage of investigating by exploring on foot instead of a visual novel style of storytelling. Am I right? Well, for one, I haven't gotten to play these games because I'm waiting for release on minor consoles and not just on mobile devices. And two, the game really didn't sell that well, like, at all. Hi guys, Post Luxcurry here. So I mentioned right here that the two investigation games didn't really sell well, like worldwide, I was basically talking about, but it actually sold really decently in Japan. It's just that the North American sales didn't sell very well. It only sold for 230,000 units, and to Capcom, I don't think that's even really that great to them. So, I mean, Ace Attorney has been really selling well, and that's probably what the numbers have been showing there. But in Japan, it's showing that it's 300,000 sales, which in Japan is actually really good. So, it's a little bit backwards sometimes, even though in general it didn't even break 1 million worldwide. So, I just wanted to point that out anyways. So, anyways, back to the video. This is very interesting though, because even though you make a game out of investigating crimes tangibly, it is something that not a lot of people want. Though really, investigations are the glue to sticking it all together. And that's what I feel about the investigations about the Great Ace Attorney. They are really taking a step back in favor of longer, more drawn out trials and having everything tied together with a great investigation segment. Don't get me wrong, I really love the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. The characters and setting are wonderful, and it probably has the best trials in the entire series. The music is very good, and I love how the developers were able to make the 3D models so expressive, which a lot of modern games fail to do, and this 3D model style works very well going forward. In conclusion, I really hope that the future Ace Attorney games take these points I mentioned and does it in many grandiose ways. I'll admit, you'll never get another Bridge to Turnabout style of investigation segments ever again, but it would be nice to have the developers think of clever ideas for investigation segments, so they won't feel dull such as the ones in the Great Ace Attorney. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and leave a like and subscribe to me as well. I hope to make more videos in the coming months, unless something happens to me in the coming months, which, you know, it probably will be something, you know. And as always, see you on the other side!